Hello and welcome to our final episode highlighting women in restoration. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're talking about how women are shaping standards, confidence, and culture within our industry. If you haven't guessed it, my special guest is Staci Sargent. She's the consultant and trainer for Restoration Made Simple. Welcome, Staci.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on and kind of talk about your unique background and where you see the industry going and the role that women play in this industry. So, to start us off strong, you have a very unique sense of leadership that shows up through your education, your structure, and clarifying. Honestly, you do a really good job at being very
Oh,
clear, rather than just like job site authority, if you will. So, as a woman who is shaping how restoration professionals are trained nationwide, how do you view your role in influencing standards and confidence across the industry?
I like that. I really liked this question because I liked how you used the word confidence. And I think that one of the things we lack in a lot of our trainings, but and I don't mean that because there's incredible trainers out there, but we tend to stovepipe like I'm training a skill, I'm training a software, I'm training a standard, whatever it is. And I think a lot of times we don't include the why. And I think anytime we train, we have to include why it's important for them to know this knowledge, why it's important for this equipment to be used this way, why we document our drawing process in this way. And I really think that it is in teaching and knowing the why that we can help technicians, project managers, new owners like build confidence, right? For speaking to property owners, speaking to adjusters, training their own technicians. So the why to me is really, really important. And I always try to spend some time on the why anytime I'm doing a training.
Yeah, and it's really important to focus on the why opposed to the how.
Yeah.
And I think it's for several reasons. One, you're able to explain or elaborate on why you're doing things the way you're doing it,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to the customer or even when we're working with a carrier, right? We all have our own specialty. And for us as restorers, we have to be able to explain why we're doing things the way we're doing it, but with confidence too. You never want to get in a situation where you're explaining something and you're like, well, wait, you don't want to have those moments. You want to confidently be able to tell them why you're doing the things
Yeah.
that you're doing, to influence the job outcome the best way possible, right? And so
Right.
I think it's really important to focus on the why. And it's really cool because you mentioned technicians, project managers, owners, and you train all of the above
Yeah.
through several CEC classes and national just virtual programs in general.
Mhm.
How does being a woman in teaching and consulting, help shape the way that you communicate, lead the room, and earn trust in the industry? And I think trust is such a huge thing. So I'm going to let you take that one away and just run with it.
I'm going to say something that it might, some people, some women in the industry are going to understand it and some may not relate to it. But I've always kind of worked in male dominated fields. I worked on a fishing boat in Alaska for a period of time. I worked in the education industry in China, which is male dominated, for a few years. Then I was active duty military for 10 years. And so I've always kind of been in those fields. And I always hated it when they wanted to remove women and men from being in the same pool. Right? It bothered me. I was like, why do we need to? And as I got into the social work field is actually where I learned the importance of this because there are a lot of people who feel like they are excluded because they don't see representation in these different fields that have maybe traditionally been male dominated. And so, 20 years ago, a woman may not have even considered restoration as a career field or something that she could get into, or even applying for a water technician position. This may not have been something that she thought about. And so I came to understand through, the experience and knowledge of other women why it's important to have these types of conversations. And it's because we want to be able to see ourselves succeeding or somebody who looks like us succeeding in these fields. And so I had to take a step back and, do a little bit of repenting for my past self, saying, why do we have to be separated between men and women, males and females? But I think it is so that we can highlight that there is room for everyone and room for everyone's experiences. So what I have found that is really important, I'll say specifically my time on the fishing boat, my time in the military, and my time in restoration, water mitigation, and restoration, is that it is important to present yourself as an expert in only those things that you are an expert in. I
Yes.
think that women feel a lot of times when they're coming into these male-dominated fields that they need to always present as strong and confident and everything else. But I think it is just as important for men and women to identify those places where maybe they need some additional training, maybe where they have failed or made mistakes, right? And then what they have done to recover that and then
Mhm.
find the expertise or the confidence that they need to move forward. So I think for everyone, one of the most important things in earning trust is being willing to be humble, being willing to be fallible, and being willing to learn from others. And if you can do that, you are almost always going to be the wisest person in the room if you're willing to do that.
Yes, and I would definitely say too, to your point, I mean, I've been in the industry for 10 years and I'm never afraid to say, hey, I don't know that answer, but I know somebody who can answer it for you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is you're going to build trust and also respect in that moment when you say, hey, I don't know, but I can find somebody that does know that, right? And to your point, you don't have to be an expert at everything, but the stuff that you are an expert in, make that your shining point. That's why we have people who are experts in mold and water and
Yeah.
fire,
Yeah.
even in business management and training, that's their cup of tea, if you will. And so we don't
Yeah.
have to be it all to everybody. We
No.
just need to find what we're good at and what we love too. I think that's the other thing is you when we talk to people about, what their specialty is, they usually are oozing out of their pores about what they're so passionate about. And that's really what makes it so special. And I think that's where confidence also comes in as well. So you did mention you've been in male dominant industries for pretty
Yeah.
much your whole career. And, you were military intelligence and you were a drill sergeant and a licensed social worker. So from those experiences that aren't really that common in the restoration consulting world, how have those paths really helped you bring like that empathy and the accountability and the structure to the industry that often struggles when we're trying to balance all three of those things at one time?
I loved all three of these words, and I want to kind of flip them and start with structure and then accountability and then kind of empathy. I think that as an owner, as a trainer who's putting together a training program, as a project manager or a team lead who's laying out a drying plan for your crew, structure is the number one, right? We need to have the structure to operate within because we've heard the terminology a lot like decision fatigue. And if you're requiring everybody to make every single decision, nobody is going to be effective. So whoever is at that, top of the line that's leading this thing, structure is most important to take out any decision making that these particular members don't need to make,
Mhm.
right? Their brain power can be used somewhere else. So I think structure is number one. I think accountability is second to that. And I'm going to get kind of specific, but I really want every company to have a specific set of communication processes that leave no question to accountability. So you should be clocking in and clocking out when you get to work, when you get to the job, when you leave the job. You should have some sort of communication record, whether it's through your CRM or whatever else, that tracks every email, every phone call, every text message that happens between a client and a technician, a project manager and an adjuster, an estimator and an adjuster. Everything should be visible to everybody else. And what this does is it decreases the opportunity or takes away the opportunity for anybody to make a decision on their own. Like, oh, I'll contact them tomorrow, but I'm going to tell the owner I contacted them today, right?
Mhm.
I left the job and got back to the shop, but actually stopped and had lunch with my girlfriend, but the owner's never going to know. Like, if we can take out the opportunity for us as humans to do what we want to do, which is be opportunists, right? Then it just kind of makes things cleaner, easier, and keeps everybody focused on work. So there's a lot of other pieces of accountability, but for me, like just structure your accountability and your communication. I think that you do everyone a favor.
Mhm.
Everyone a favor. And then one term that I learned through my social work studies, and I rolled my eyes at it, the first, I don't know, probably like 3 years of it, was this idea of every person has their own lived lens. And I'm like we all have, there's one reality, we're all living in it, everybody else is just, working through their imagination. But it's not true. We do all have our own lived lens. And I think as a leader, a manager, an owner, if you can see and understand who you're working with and what their lived lens is, I think it just makes you that more effective at managing them,
Mhm.
right? Or getting the best out of them. I don't think that means that you change your rules and regulations for each person, right? It should be rules for me are rules for thee. Absolutely, it should be across the board, but it can help you, manage that person, communicate with that person better, get the very best that you can out of them. So I think the empathy and understanding each individual person, their lived lens, right? And then getting the best out of them is really, really important.
It really is. And I would definitely say, too, to your point, I mean, we all see things differently. For us, selfishly, we see this stuff every day. But for our customers, this is probably their first time ever experiencing something. And so to understand that is extremely crucial. And I think you did have that right. It's structure and accountability do go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that empathy side of things come in when you do have your structure and accountability down, right? You cannot have those things without each other. It's very important to understand that. And we're in a very service-based industry. So we should be specialists, if you will, on the empathy side of things. But I
Yeah.
think oftentimes when we're focusing on that side of things, we sometimes neglect the accountability and the structure and vice versa. So it's
Yeah.
important for all three of them to be sound all at the same time. And to your point, if it's an expectation set across the board, then everybody knows that they have to meet
Yeah.
those expectations, opposed to, like you said, oh, I went to lunch with my girlfriend and then I went here, but I did come back to the office. No, let's cut that part out
Yeah.
and let's
Just
make sure we're
don't
telling the whole
even let it be an
story.
option. Don't let it be an option,
Yeah.
right? And this one thing, I my brother Greg owned a water mitigation company in Denver, and he had two like all-star technicians. They were really great, and they both ended up like around the same time being single fathers. And the start time for the company was always you show up at 6:30, we're on site at 7:30, that type of thing. Well, it was not working for these two men anymore because they had to get their kids to school, they had to this or that. And, Greg really kind of had two choices at that point of time. He could say, listen, I need to find new technicians, right? Like, this isn't going to work for me. I understand your guys' lives have changed, but he understood like what they were going through. And he sat down with them and said, what do you guys need? What do we need to make this work for you? And they said, we need to be able to get our kids to school,
Yeah.
right? So start time at the shop was 8:30. They didn't schedule a first on site at a job until 9 o'clock. And those guys were incredible, incredible technicians for the next 5 years that he owned that company.
And that's a really great story too, because I think if we're really looking at the industry as a whole right now, one of the number one problems, actually the number one problem, is finding qualified techs. And
Yes.
so if you have to take pause for a second and understand how you can work with your team and how your team can work with you, it's well worth it because to your point, you just said for the next 5 years, there were no
Yeah.
problems, right? They were able to get ahead of it and really make a difference. But also, that may have made the experience for the customer a little bit better too, right? Who wants to be up at 7:30 in the morning if
Yeah.
they don't have to be, right? So I think that it all came together for everything and it was
Yeah.
best for their business, right? And so,
Hmm.
we also have to remember too, empathy extends far beyond our customers. It's internal too. If we don't have
Yeah.
it internal, how can we expect to kind of exude that to those that we serve? So you do train quite a bit. I know the team trains, but I know that you
Yeah.
train quite a bit, and you've really helped elevate just like the workforce and their competency and how to scale and things like that. What responsibilities do you feel as an educator, help develop not just better technicians, but stronger leaders within the companies themselves?
Yeah. So with our training, we do individual training with our clients and our companies, obviously, but I do a standing every Thursday morning. I do when it's 6 Mountain Time and 8 Mountain Time. So depending what time zone you're in, you can come on, but it's a 30-minute Zoom training. Technicians, owners, project managers, they get on. I have a topic. I go over it for 30 minutes. Everybody gets to be involved if they want, add their own experiences, this type of thing. So I do that training every Thursday. It's something I've done for the last, I think, 4 years now. And I don't miss it. I never miss a Thursday. There's no reason I miss a Thursday.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of times where I have been traveling and I've had like an on-site that I haven't been able to do that training. And so one of the other owners will get on and do that training. I think that's happened 3 times in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Don't miss a Thursday. And so I think training, you have to be consistent. It has to be part of the culture. It has to be part of the job description. Continuing to educate yourself, to learn more, to discuss, to expose yourself to other things. And so consistency, part of the culture, part of the job description for everyone. I think it's really, really important. So I think that's really important. The other thing is you have to always review, right? Like review. It's so funny. I had this experience. I've had a company that we've been working with for 4 years. They've been on my Thursday trainings for 4 years. Um, and I talk every now and again about the difference between evaporation potential and vapor pressure differential, right? So it's just vapor pressure differential, you're using the psychometric chart, evaporation potential, you're using like Jeremy Reitz, shout out Jeremy Reitz, his calculator. And it's so easy. You plug the numbers in, you see what conditions you need to be able to get evaporation potential so you can dry out these low evaporation materials. So I have talked about this probably 2 to 3 times a year for the last 4 years. And I finally she was on a call. They had a job. They were struggling to dry out this specific material. I did the train. She called me after the training. She's like, Staci, we're finally getting it. We just went out. We used the calculator. We know what we need. We're going to come back tomorrow. I'll let you know how it goes. But in my mind, I was like, you have probably heard me talk about this 12 plus times.
Consistency is so key. And I also think accountability, right, to review to your point, because you can go to all the training you want to go to, but if you're not reiterating it or even having a debrief, it's going to leave your mind at some point in
Yeah,
time. Perfect example because they probably had other things going on while they were there. They just did, it was not one of those things that
yeah,
they were like, oh, we need to follow up on this. We need to talk about this as a team. And so I think really, and this is something that I know the entire industry is going through this. So this is very timely is when we are cutting budgets or making cuts, usually marketing and education go
yeah,
first. But
yeah,
those two things really shouldn't because, those are the foundations of one, not only just successfulness of your staff, but also the way you deliver customer service to your
yeah,
teams and to your customers, excuse me. And so I think it's really, really important for people to just take a second and say, okay, if we want to be the best that we can be, what does that entail? And that's regular trainings, whether it's external or internal, regular
yeah,
reviews. I also think too, if you're seeing some things missed on jobs, that's a perfect opportunity to train on said issue, right?
yeah,
I think sometimes we do a really bad job about overthinking on training and things like that. But to your point, you're consistent every Thursdays. It can be the smallest topic of
Yeah.
conversation, but it can also be the biggest topic of conversation. And it's really about what's going on and what you're seeing. And I think if we were a little bit better at that industry wide, we would see a little bit more advancement than we are currently right now. Because, like I said, the biggest things that we cut first are generally marketing and training. Those are the two
Yeah.
things that automatically get cut. But I think it's time for us to reevaluate, especially based on some of the scenarios that you've given, right? Like, wow, 12 touch points on the 12th, 13th one, I finally got through. That's really scary, but also that's a reality, right?
Well, and it depends on when it has intensity for them. Like you said, the other times we were talking about this in training, something else was going on. But just so happened that this training landed when it solved a problem that they were currently having. And so it was actionable for them at that time. And I do find that that is kind of the key. Like you'll really get people when you happen to create a training or put together a training that is actionable for them like at that time. And so those are my favorites when like after training as I get a call and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you were probably reading our mind. We were just talking about that." And the other thing that is great is I have such access, to everyone's jobs, to their field documentation. They call me when they're on site. I see their videos. They call me with their problems. And so I never use stock photos ever, right? Like we get to see the nitty gritty, the down and dirty, not like, did this work in ideal conditions? Or
Mhm.
how did this work, right? Like with these complexities. And so I'm just really fortunate that I do have access. To so much work material and so much, training material that we can go through these real world situations, not made up, not fabricated, not like classroom, but we can take an actual in the field job, look how it was applied into a documentation system, how the adjuster responded to it, so we can really do what I like to call like global training. The majority of the time, we will talk process, we will talk equipment, we will talk standards, we will talk documentation. And why? Right? All of that has to come together for us to be
Yeah.
successful.
It really does. And I liked how you circled back to the why because that's how we started this conversation is
Yeah.
the why. And there's so many variables to the why. It's not just why. It's why do we use the equipment we use? Why do we use the software that we use? Why are we using the techniques and all these things that we're using? And there's a reason behind it all. And it puts everything into a pretty present with a bow on it, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's really our job. Our job is to tell a story at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And I think it's nice to go through real life situations because, to your point, when you're training off of stock images or like the perfect scenario, we never have the perfect scenario. Let's be real. We probably have the perfect chaos scenario more than we have the
Yes.
perfect
Yeah.
actual job. So I think that's really key to really understand the why and take it. And I think it's silly too because some people think, oh, I've trained on this, 4 times this year. Well, sometimes you need to train on those things 4 or 5 times a year, right? Don't ever sell yourself short or your team short because you feel like you've had too much repetition. You can always change it in a different direction and really capitalize on it for your team. And I think that's really important to what you just said is it does come back to the why. There's
Yeah.
always a new lesson, no matter if we're talking equipment, documentation, scenario, whatever the case may be, there's always going to be a why weaved in there for somebody. It might be different from what it is for you and for me, but there's going to be a why defined in there for the people who are going through the training. So, my last question for you today is for the women who want to contribute
Yeah.
to our industry beyond field operations through consulting, training, education, etc., what advice would you give them about finding their voice, owning their expertise, and building influence in the industry?
Well, you already gave my answer earlier. You said the word because I wrote down here, and then when you said the word, I was like, oh, we're on the same wavelength, which is have it be something that you're passionate about. Right? Like, I don't want anybody to join an industry, and not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to choose something that we're passionate about initially, but we can always learn to be passionate about it, right? And usually that just takes exposure and education and whatever, finding a why, right, in the industry that you're passionate about. So I just think I like to be useful.
Yeah.
Right. So when my Greg, he's actually my brother, not my husband. Everybody thinks we're husband and wife because we have the last name and we're of a certain age, right? But one of my business partners is my brother, and he started the consulting company. And when I got out of the military and came back, he asked me about, coming on and doing some training stuff. He said, I'm done. He says, I do not want to teach another, technician how to plug in a DHU. He says, I've been doing this for 20 years. He loves the business side of it, the numbers side of it, working with new owners, helping them become profitable as soon as possible. But he always knew that training was important. It was always something that he had in his companies. And so he says, I want you to do the training side of it. And so I just studied and I learned and I went out on as many job sites as I possibly could and then just expanded my exposure to different documentation softwares and, everything else and just really developed a passion for building science and how to dry and what we can do and all of these different things. And, I've always kind of done that, whether I was on a fishing boat or I was in China working on English learning language software or, in the military, whatever it was. I just really wanted to become useful. And
Yeah.
so I think find a way that you can be useful and then develop a passion for what it is that you're doing. Always stay humble and willing to learn, and very few doors will be closed on you.
Yeah, that's so true. I will definitely say too. I mean, we're living proof, right? You're on the training and consulting side, I'm on the editorial and really like learning about people and networking. And I'm on that side. I would say more on like a marketing side, if you will, because, editorial is marketing and you get to
Mhm.
talk to people. But, we just found our own passions. And honestly, you are able to go and try other things even when you're passionate about something else, right? So in 2025, I had the opportunity to do some hands-on training, and boy, did that open some doors for me. I was like, I really dig this. Like, where has this been my
Yeah.
whole 10 years, right? And so I think that there's always opportunity to continuously evolve. And I think you guys offer several opportunities like that. And I'm going to just briefly mention this. I'm going to the owners retreat that you guys are hosting in Salt Lake City next month. And, that's an opportunity too, right? You're not just training, you're providing networking. And so if you love to talk and you love people, there is a space for you here. If you
Mhm.
love to market, there's a space. Really, the sky is the limit. There's
Yeah.
so many pieces of the business that allow you to really find a niche, if you will, and really just explore that and master it and become an expert in that space. And I think you said something that's really key. Staying humble is one of the biggest things that you could possibly do in this industry because the moment you think you know it all is the moment you're going to get left behind. And so, we have to remember there's always something to learn. There's always somebody who knows something that we don't, and there's always something that we know that somebody else doesn't know, right? And so it's really important.
Kaylin, in every single industry, right, there are those people that have been around forever and they are the go-to and they are the expert and everything else. But at a certain point, they sometimes stop learning.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's where the humility comes in, right? As soon as you don't think there is anything left that you can learn or nobody can teach you anything, that is the exact moment that you are now a step behind.
Yes,
Yeah.
100% well said. And I think I've said this and I've heard it said too. The moment you think you know everything, it's time for you to move on, whether it's from the industry or the position that you're in, right? So
Mhm.
great advice, great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to kind of peel back the layers of who Stacy is and why she loves our industry so much. And for all of you watching, we will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.